Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Right now, I'm with Quick Stix Productions from Twitter. We've debated before on a topic before of North Korea on interventionism versus isolation, and now we're going to have another debate on this channel. And this time, we're going to discuss the topic of morality. Where does it come from? Is it objective? Is it subjective? And I do appreciate you taking the time to listen in. So,
Yeah,
since this is my channel and most of my viewers know my thoughts, I'm going to let the opposition speaker get 3 minutes to start with his opening statement. So, Quick Sticks, give us a 3-minute opening statement on your position.
yeah. Well, I mostly am coming on tonight because I want to pick off where I left off on. Specifically, we touched on objective versus subjective morality in the debate last time we did it, and I feel there wasn't really an adequate response on your end from that. There doesn't seem to be anything you morality from, but I recently checked your channel and there's a Christian uh video, so that makes me assume you think morality comes from God. And I might be wrong. You might think that like atheists can believe in objective morality, which I disagree with. I think the only way you can have a consistent view, like be an interventionist, is at that point is you believe might makes right. Unless you, at least with you, if you, I don't know if you're going to admit it or not, but tonight, if you admit it's just God that you think is the arbiter of morality, then you at least have a position. You at least have a position on it, as opposed to what you gave me in the last debate, which seemed to be nothing at all. And yeah, that's my opening statement, I guess.
All
Hello?
right, let me state my position then on what morality is. And address maybe one of the things that you just said. When it comes to might versus right, and your statement that the idea that intervention is a might versus right thing, that you can only believe in intervention if you believe might versus right, I don't agree with that. That's might versus right is more of an idea of imperialism. You know, the idea that you go into another place and you just say, I'm in charge now and you're under new management and this is my decision. Interventionism is something totally different. The idea of interventionism is the idea that people who believe in might versus right do not have the right simply because they're stronger and should be stopped. In the case, for example, of Saddam Hussein, Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin, Mao Zedong, and other not so nice individuals, and not just individuals, but even organizations, you know, like Colombia's FARC, Ulster's or Northern Ireland's IRA, or, you know, the Middle Eastern Muslim Brotherhood. So that's a different perspective. That's to address your issue of, well, it's might versus right. And on the topic of morality, though, I have, yes, in the past done some religious videos. I posted one to YouTube. I have a few more that I have saved from the past that I probably should post. But I do believe that morality is objective rather than subjective, because to me, the idea of morality being a subjective, that it's subject to really one's personal preference, this is not a good thing, and nor does it make sense, because when we go across and we think about morality in general, all cultures, all places in the world have at least a basic foundation that they all agree on what is good in morality. So, most cultures say, well, you can't just Most people say, well, you can't just murder someone for no reason, or you can't just take what someone has for no reason, or you can't just hurt someone for no reason. Now, obviously, different places you go, the differences vary on, well, what is acceptable to do harm to someone, what is acceptable to take something from someone, and what is acceptable to take the life of someone. But everyone across the world at least has certain foundations of morality.
I mean, I don't think that's objective morality. I think that's a byproduct of a functional society. Like, you can't have a functional society without uh, people agreeing to a social contract of things like don't rape, don't murder. Um, but who you murder, who you rape, who you mistreat or mistreat as second-class citizens, for example, varies wildly across the world. For example, in Tajikistan, in many parts of that country, it's still morally acceptable to kidnap a woman and force them to get married. Uh, in many parts of the world, especially in a lot of Middle Eastern countries, it's morally acceptable to stone gay people to death. Uh, in some cultures, it's morally acceptable to, and it's considered morally abhorrent to let women have an education. Even in the West, in Europe, there's moral differences. For example, in a lot of Mediterranean countries, they have much more conservative approaches to modesty than their northern counterparts. And in America as well, I mean, I think that's, like a massive, what would be the word? It's a massive salad of all different moralities. It could vary wildly from state to state or even county to county. So this idea that morality is like objective, I think, is nonsensical, and the standards vary wildly across the map. I think there's probably ones that are more. There's certain trends that are universal across the map, sure, but I think that's just because they're necessary for a society to function. But even the ones you describe aren't strictly true. The ancient Aztecs society worked, functioned pretty well, and they sacrificed people by the thousands every year. So they didn't have a very they didn't value human life like a lot of other cultures in human history. So I don't think this. I think this idea that you have that morality is objective is nonsensical. And yeah, also I want you to clarify, where does objective morality come from? Because if you believe in objective morality, you have to believe it comes from some sort of higher power, in my opinion. I'm wondering I assume if you're a Christian, you believe it comes from God. So can you confirm or deny that?
Well, you made a lot of points right there. I'm gonna have to try to start writing them down so I can address them each one at a time. But I suppose I'll just answer your last question though, because that was the more recent one. I do consider myself a Christian in most respects, and like a cultural Christian, and I do and I do sometimes go to church. So I do think that morality is objective, and I do think that morality comes from a higher something higher than ourselves, because I believe there's an order to the universe. There are people who call it Yahweh. There are people who call it Jehovah. There are people who call it Allah. There are people who call it Krishna, or different, or even Buddha, or just have different varied degrees of it. But the fact that all people around the world historically have understood that there is an order, and that there is some sort of something higher beyond ourselves, because of just the vastness of the universe and just how small of specks we are in it, that we're all a part of this plan and that there is something beyond ourselves. So, yes, I do believe in a God, and I do believe that morality comes from God. And I do believe that there is a basics, and so that's where to answer your question, yes, that at least that last one.
Well, could I just say that's see if you just said that in the debate, that would be I would be more happy with that than what you gave me, which just seemed to be a whole lot of nothing. Um, and I'm not. That's a whole other can of worms, like religion. But what I would add, my second question after that would be, how can an atheist be a neocon then? Without if they're a neocon, they don't believe in a higher power. So how can they believe in objective morality?
Because even if someone is not a believer in God or in gods, a person still lives in the world or universe where the objective morality comes from a higher being. I don't have to believe that something exists. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And at the same time, a person who is an atheist, who calls himself a neoconservative, um, says, "Well, I don't believe in a God." But that objective morality still exists, and they live in that world where there is one, and they have that understanding. While they may not believe that God exists, they still understand that there is a that their morality is objective, in that there are certain standards that human beings, should not violate. For example, someone should not have their life taken unduly from them. Someone should not be oppressed for speaking their mind reasonably. Someone should not lord themselves over others unfairly or unduly. Others should. So of course there's that. Now, going back, I suppose, with your other points, because you mentioned that, well, morality is subjective because of people's different perspectives on what is right and what is wrong. For example, you mentioned bride kidnapping. You mentioned Aztec sacrifices. You also mentioned different lifestyle choices in the U.S. and stoning of gays, and different countries in the Middle East. I suppose you would say that, well, because people like you have different perspectives on what is morally right and what is morally wrong, that you would say, oh, well, it's subjective. But it's still, every system, while there are differences, every system still has a basic foundation. Even in Aztec society, while killing and slaughtering and sacrificing individuals from different tribes was acceptable, you couldn't go into the streets of Tenochtitlan and just knock some average Joe over the head. That also, in terms of stoning a person in the Middle East because they are LGBT, you can't simply grab a random person and stone them to death just because you wanted to. And in the case of bride kidnapping in Tajikistan and other places, you can't just go kidnap someone because you don't like them. So while, unfortunately, all these different cultures practiced, and some today still practice, morally reprehensible acts, they still have a basic moral foundation, that they understand that there is a right and a wrong. Now, unfortunately, today they're still practicing systems that we know are wrong. And this, I believe, adds to my point that morality is subjective, because we can look at practices in history, like Aztec sacrifices, and practices today like stoning of LGBT people and bride kidnapping, and see, hey, that is morally wrong. And so morality is obviously objective, because we as people can look at something, as civilized people can look at certain practices in history and in life today and say, no, you can't do that. And people say, why? And we say, well, that's because it's wrong. And the person's response is, well, according to you, but according to me, it's right. So therefore, it's my right. And we say no, because you don't have that right. So, of course, morality is not objective, because if we have morality that is objective, then what you do have is essentially the idea that, well, I can go marry, three people and have a fling on the side because, heck, I can do what I want. Or this idea of, well, I can go steal from my neighbor what I want because, heck, that's cool to me. It's not bad. It's only bad to you. Or this idea that, hey, I can go get drunk and then just drive and slam my car into someone's home because, hey, no biggie. So of course morality is objective. We all have systems of understanding and the idea that this is wrong, this is right.
Okay. I mean, your first example, I wouldn't even have an issue with. If somebody wants to be in a polygamist relationship, that's up to them, but that's besides the point. Uh, anyway, no, but can't you see that's a byproduct of a functioning society? That's not objective morality in of itself. Uh, for a society to function, obviously you need rules. You need you need you can't have a functioning society if you think everyone's going to be at your throat all the time. So yeah, that's gonna be a byproduct of society, but you're not obliged really to live in society though. You can become animalistic if you want, go and live in the woods and kill and rape all you want. Uh, so no, there's the only reason it doesn't happen is because of man-made societies. That's the only reason it doesn't happen. But there's nothing intrinsic in us that stops us from doing that. Humans have gone feral. There was a girl in Ukraine that was raised by dogs and picked up all of their traits and became more dog-like than human. So um, this this idea that it's like intrinsic is nonsense. It comes from uh, society, from the desire to live in a society. It doesn't come from something intrinsic in us, and I don't think it's ever been proven scientifically that uh, there's anything intrinsic in us that uh, determines an objective moral compass.
Well, I would disagree because, I mean, when it comes to people and human civilization, um, all of them have set rules and set understandings, and this is why there is objective morality, because each one historically, and yes, some are bad, some are worse than others, have a basic understanding that they're in order to have a functioning society, you have to have a foundation of certain rules or ideas to prevent anarchy, disorder, and chaos. Because if there is if there's this idea that, well, anything goes, I can do what I want, when I want, how I want, when I want, then you essentially just have anarchy. And there are many anarchists today who say, well, what's so wrong with that? I'll tell you what's wrong with that. It means complete disorder and the chaos in the streets. It means the idea that essentially some of the worst people in our societies today will simply just go roughshod and do whatever the heck they want because there'll be nothing to stop them. Because there's no law and order. And now you don't obviously want law and order without justice, but no law and order altogether and simply laissez-faire essentially means do what you want, when you want, where you want. And this is a and what when you have that sort of system, you begin you it allows for people to violate others' agency, because it says that, well, there is no such thing as agency. Because if there is no God and there is no objective morality, then that means that man is God. And whatever man desires, as in it on a desires, whatever it may be, I'm allowed to do it.
Um, I mean, to me, what you've proved, I mean, you've basically self refuted your argument there. It's it's not God. It's people who decide what the social contract is. As I've shown you in all those countless examples, uh, what morality is in each culture can vary wildly, um, and um, there being certain trends is just a byproduct of a society being functional. Um, and just to clarify, I'm not in favor of like anarchism or barbarism or whatever. But there is a there's a moral argument that going back to being primitive is more morally just. Like that's why there's primitivists. They believe that well, there are objective benefits that would happen if we went back to being more animalistic. We wouldn't we wouldn't have the same environmental impact we would on the planet. We wouldn't have we wouldn't be causing a massive interruption in the food chain in the animal kingdom. Uh, for the planet, probably anarchism would be better if humans adopted it. Uh, am I in favor of that? No, because that's an appeal to nature fallacy. But there is an argument there that primitivism is a good thing. So it's not objectively bad. There's plenty of people who believe that a return to a primitive existence is better.
I don't think so, because when you look at primitivism in general, historically, when man allowed essentially his base nature, his inherently flawed and base nature, to rule over his reason and his logic. We lived in a world where essentially, men took what they wanted. The strong ruled the weak, the strong oppressed the weak, the strong could take what they wanted when they wanted and do what they wanted whenever they wanted. So I think that so there are some people who are anarcho-primitivists who think that, well, if we just go back in time, we turn the clock back, that everything will go back to this wonderful sort of egalitarian, lovely, eco-friendly state. And that's just not realistic, because historically speaking, we know that when man was in his most primitive state, he was at his most violent and in his most base nature, which was wrong. And so that's why morality is objective, because we look back and we see when man allows his base nature to rule over himself, it creates violence, oppression, evil, and all sorts of horrors that we don't want to go through again.
I mean, who says that? You? Why are these things bad? Like, are they bad because um, of some sort of intrinsic morality, or are they bad because you've been brought up in a society to believe that those things are bad and have been put into a social contract that you had no say in? If you were in if you were in like the Middle East or Mesoamerica or any other society through human history, I think you'd be telling me a completely different story here. Um, you would be saying, "Oh, I don't know. It's like it's okay to rape women because they're a second class citizen," or you have to sacrifice X amount of people to appease the moon god or whatever. Um, so this is all relative to you, really. This isn't an absolute certainty.
Well, I don't think so because, and one, like saying, well, if you'd been born here and then, you would have believed so and so. Well, I don't know that because obviously, or no one knows that because I wasn't there and they weren't there. It's more of a matter of saying,
Not can I interrupt? Not 100% no, but it's very likely you would have embraced the culture of said time.
well, I consider that point's debatable. I
No,
don't.
it's not debatable. It's just a fact. Most people in the West hold Western values because they were brought up in a culture from birth to believe that. Most people who believe in, uh, Muslim values, Islamic values, is because they were brought up in an Islamic theocracy. Um, that's the reason they believe these things. It didn't come from nothing. So yes, is there a chance? Yeah, you might have been like a moralist rebel in that society, sure, but it's way more likely you would have just been another person in the crowd going along with the social contract of the time.
Well, I consider that point debatable and not concrete because historically speaking, there have been many people who have lived in different societies and different persuasions, and yet had values and or beliefs that revolutionized the times and affected how we live today. Not every, but it gives a suggestion though that well, it's just a matter of nature versus the ourselves. So nature versus nurture. So I don't think that the two are. I think that the two are mixed. Obviously, one's environment around someone does affect them, but intrinsically speaking, we still all have the same. We are, as part of the human species, we all still have, at the end of the day, similarities and things that are very similar. And so, just like with the basic foundations of morality, while one's definition varies, the morality is not subjective because we all still have, at the end of the day, basic foundations. Like what Dragon Ross is saying in the chat right here. There's certain things that every nation treats off as off limits.
Okay, that sounds more like, yeah, what I'm getting from this argument so far is rules equal objective morality. No, that's how a society. That's how. That's the only way a society can function. And living in a society is the desire of most human beings. So that's why. That's why there's this template, but that's not morality in of itself. That's just the template of morality. What moral decisions are actually made, as I've pointed out, varies wildly from society to society, from time to time, to where and when, and all. And do I think there's influence and factors on morality? Sure. The reason you get kosher and halal is because, well, for example, they wouldn't eat bacon in the Middle East because it was a meat that tended to go rancid. Um, as was the same with shellfish. It was a meat that went off very easily and got contaminated very easily. So yeah, there's influencing factors, but they're not set in concrete. They're not set in some sort of pre-programmed thing within human nature. They're decided by a mixture of our the personal preference and the material conditions of the time and place said society is in. Hello?
So if
Are you
I
there?
get your so if I get your so if I get your point right there, what you're trying to suggest is that there are factors that create these rules. rather rather than necessarily the rules themselves that create the environment.
Well, I think it's a mix of uh, decision making on a human's part, like just sheer uh, randomness, and also I also think environmental factors play a role, but that isn't objective morality. That's just adaptation. That's the if it was objective morality, that would be assuming something that's programmed into us by some sort of higher power.
Objective morality is within all of us. The problem is that as a person who believes in God, the fact of the matter is that because man is fallen, and because man had decided in the beginning to follow his slash her own selfish desires over over right order, that unfortunately today we have these issues of bride kidnapping and of stoning and of other problems. And so and so what we have is today where people follow practices and do things that are morally reprehensible. But this I think proves my point strongly, that we have this understanding as evolved and human beings that there is a right or wrong, and it's not right to do certain things. Now, some people say, well, mind your own business, because my morality is my morality, your morality is your morality. But if we have that sort of system, then what that does is I go back to my earlier point, is it creates a system or a nation or a community in which essentially you have anything goes. If you have one person in the community that says, well, I think it's okay if I stone my daughter because she spoke to a boy that wasn't related to her, and you have a system that says, well, morality is subjective, then what you have is then a system in which that person can do what they want, and the other people just have to sit and watch, because morality is subjective, it's not objective. And that's why we have laws in the West or in other places against that, because we are trying to suppress man's inner desire for control, to oppress, to engage in disgusting acts, because because man is unfortunately flawed inherently.
Okay. I mean, I think that's a straw man argument. That's not what I've argued for at all. All I've argued for is the basis of morality as a social contract, which is a desire to live in a society, which is what I advocate for. I don't advocate for everyone has their own personal morality. I believe that everyone who has the same mutual morality as me and agrees to a same social contract should have the right to live in their society and promote those values, not by force but through example.
Well,
I, I
example
don't.
example does not always
Ba-
work.
ba- ba- I know it doesn't always work, but I've no right to lord my morality over another nation. I don't believe that I've.
We do have that, because if someone is doing something utterly reprehensible, then we have to do that.
See, I
Um,
don't even understand your logic in a lot of areas. I mean, there's things in the Bible that contradict what you say from your Christian perspective. Like, there's rules specifically in the Bible how to treat a slave. It doesn't even outright say slavery is wrong.
well, I don't agree with that, because we
Well,
look
you disagree
at
with God's then.
no, I don't. I think because there's an important rule in the Bible which says to love thy neighbor as thyself, and if you really love thy neighbor as yourself, you're not going to make him or her a slave. I do understand that in that we have that we can't simply allow certain systems that are bad to exist.
Yeah, but what
That's well,
love?
that's the way they live. No, I mean, because like, let's look,
Wait, no, no.
for example. Well, let me finish.
Wait, no, no, no. Let me finish. What
Well,
love?
well, can I?
What love is can be twisted to mean a lot of different things. You could twist that to believe that slavery is in the best interest of certain people. For example, like women. I'm not saying I want that, but I'm saying that's how it can be twisted. And the fact that you're saying that slavery is wrong right off the bat, that puts you in contention with God because it says in the Bible that slavery is acceptable, and here's the rules how uh, you look after your slave.
Well, first to your point, well, that rule can be twisted. No, it can't because even in America where we had slavery, if a person in the back in those days, people said, well, that's just the way the South is. We just need to leave them be. No, you can't let people.
Does the Bible say
Can
slavery?
I,
Wait, no, no.
can I
Does the
finish? No,
Bible?
no,
No, no, no,
you
no, no.
interrupted me. No, no, no.
I want you
No, but
to.
you interrupted me again,
No,
man.
no,
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 quick
no, no,
sticks. I
no,
need to
no, no,
finish my
no, no,
point.
no,
You
no, no.
can't just
I want
interrupt
you
me
to
again.
answer one simple
No,
thing
I'm
before
gonna
going
answer
further.
it if you let me finish, quick sticks. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, you can't. So to say that, well, that's the way they live, you can't do that. No, you have to stop that, and that's why it took even a war to stop that. And with regards to your statement, well, in the Old Testament, in Leviticus, it says that there are certain rules prescribed as to the treatment of slaves. These were laws made by Moses, and while Moses was a prophet for the time and was chosen by God to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt, that does not mean that everything he said or did was right. I mean, for example, in one part of the Old Testament,
Is the Bible the
person who
word
is
of God?
picking up.
Yes or no? Is the Bible the word of God? Yes or no?
I'm not going to answer that in a binary way
Okay, okay. Well, you're
because
not a
the question
Christian then.
no, it's not because the question suggests that, well, you must believe that literally every word of the Bible
Yes, you have to believe every word
literally
of the Bible is the word of
no
God.
the no the
Otherwise, you're
Bible
going
no
against God and you're a sinner.
no I'm not. The Bible is a testament of God. It is a mixture of history. It's a mixture of philosophy. It's a mixture of morality. It's even got love and poetry. It's
So you're a cultural Christian and you don't actually believe in
no, I
Christianity.
don't. No, I'm not. No, I'm not a religious fanatic, and that I don't take literally every word of a religious scripture
Yeah,
and
but it says in the Bible that it's the word of God, and if you go against the word of God, you're a sinner, and you will go to hell for that.
no, it doesn't. And it's the Bible.
The Westboro Baptist Church is
The,
closer to Christianity than you are.
I do not.
It is. It is. They follow the Bible more than you do.
No, they don't. What they do is they follow a version of the Bible, which is not the way that God wants us to live. Have the God who of the universe wants us to love thy neighbor as thyself. He wants us to treat our fellow human beings correctly and rightly, and
And
obviously wants us to live. And God wants us to live moral lifestyles that are good for our own benefit and for the benefit of society.
what's love? What's love?
So
Define love.
I think Jesus defined that very well when he was saying, when he was asked, what's the most important commandments? And he said, you must love the Lord your God with all your strength, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And when he was asked, well, who is my neighbor? Trying to suggest, well, what is love to a neighbor? And he
That's how to love. What is the definition of love? Not what how to love. What
well,
is
no, it was given in that parable in which when you see someone who is needy and help and in need, you don't just walk by the wayside. You give what you can, how you can. You treat other people as you would want to be treated. So in the parable that he gave of the Samaritan who stopped for the Jew who was abused and robbed on the street, and there were people who were religious, who were rich or in the society, and just passed by the way and left that person to suffer. While the Samaritan, who again in those times, Samaritans and Jewish people did not get along because there were historical long-standing issues. That Samaritan stops, aids the person in need, takes him to the inn, gets him medically treated, and says, here's to pay for the services to help this person. And if there's anything else that needs to be paid, I will pay it upon my return. So that is the definition of love. It's looking upon people in the society and in the world that you live in and saying that I'm partly responsible for them, that I need to love and treat them and help them. And so that's what love is.
And how, yeah, and how how do you bring that love to somebody from the Westboro Baptist Church perspective? You bring that love by putting the fear of God into people, which is part of Christianity. You need to fear God, and if you don't put that fear into them, if you don't tell them that, if you don't put the fear that homosexuality is an abomination, or you're fighting or adultery or whatever it is, then they're going to burn in hell. So how, from the Christian perspective, how is that loving? Let somebody wallow in their sin.
Well, that's the Westboro Baptist definition. That's not the teachings though of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, yes, did tell people that if you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, but they're helping, in their eyes, they're helping people.
But they don't love them though. They don't do it out of love. They do it out of
How do you know?
A contempt.
How do you know? Sometimes you've got to give tough love. This isn't me saying I support them. This is me just taking things to their ultimate conclusion within Christian doctrine.
I don't agree, because when you talk about, because then that gets into a matter of, well, which Christianity is correct, because then there's the LDS Church, Latter-day Saints, there's the Presbyterians, there's the Protestants, there's the Catholics, and all these different definitions, or even the
it's almost like they have their own subjective morality. It's weird, isn't it?
No, it's that they all have a basic foundation, which means morality is objective.
So they have the template for morality, and then they decide what morality is from there.
And so you admit that there is a template, that there is a basic foundation.
I believe if there's any formal structure, you need a template. Yeah. Whether you
have to morality is not subjective.
No, it is subjective, because that's just a template. That's not morality in of itself. That's how a society. That's how any sort of formal structure on a large scale works. That's not objective morality. That's the template for morality.
And that means that with a template, you have objective morality.
See, because
so I think this is where we diverge, because what you're saying is, what I'm saying is the very existence of a template means that morality is objective, and your opinion is that, well, because people diverge from that template, that means that their morality is subjective.
What do you mean? What do you mean diverge from the template? In what way?
Have this basic understanding that there are certain things that are right, and there are certain things that are just basically wrong.
Yeah, and what that is different. What's right and wrong is different wildly in different societies. It's not uniformal at all. The only thing is there's a few template rules that need to be in place for a society to function, like don't kill everyone, don't, you know, do whatever you want. But apart from that, you've pretty much got free way to impose whatever morality you want on people. And again, and
So,
again, and even
because there is the existence of truth versus
even at the template of morality, people are not obliged to live in a society. People can go and live in a commune in the woods and do their own thing. So they don't even have to adhere to this template. You only need to adhere to it if you believe in society. And some people don't. Some people go and live. Some people pull a Jim Jones and live in the woods.
and yes, people do that, but you're suggesting that because people have differences in what they want to do, right versus wrong, that means that there is no basic foundation. No, that's a part of people's inherent nature to rebel against systems that are needed for their benefit. Like the idea of
How do you know what people need?
not committing murder, not taking what's not yours from someone, not
you can be a murderer and never get caught and live a perfectly functional life. Just saying.
But you can successfully evade the law, but there is a law, and if the law,
and I agree that
will
there
punish you.
Yeah, I agree. There should be a law, but there's nothing intrinsic in there's nothing programmed in humans that is telling us to do this. We just do it because it's mutually beneficial, and that's it. There's not a higher power. I will give you credit. You at least have God to point to. But it's even worse with an atheist warhawk, because they don't even have that to point to. They just have might makes right to point to, and
no, they don't. That's an imperialist. That a person who's a neoconservative and an atheist or agnostic simply says, that God, that they don't believe in God, but they believe that morality is objective. They understand things, but they don't know where it comes from. So, for an atheist or an agnostic neoconservative, they understand that there is a basic moral foundations that that you don't have the right to oppress someone or abuse someone or violate someone's basic human dignity. They may not know where it comes from, but they still have that foundation.
Okay. And why should they impose that on, why should they impose their version of morality on other countries?
Because people think that it's okay for
what you consider abhorrent and wrong might be completely different in another culture.
I think everyone, no, if a person, like, for example, let's look at Saddam Hussein in the past, thinks that he can shoot someone because they stole a bar of soap from him, and they didn't have any soap for their family. No, we all know that's wrong. We all know that, when Saddam decided, well, I'm going to go gas thousands upon thousands, and even, maybe even tens of thousands.
Who says it's wrong? I'm talking about from an atheist perspective, by the way. Put yourself in the shoes of an atheist. Who says that I can't do that?
Because we all have a basic understanding of what is right and what is wrong. Now,
we don't. There's societies that believe that cannibalism is perfectly acceptable.
And we know that cannibalism is
not.
I
think you've just been. I think you've been entrenched so much in Western values. I don't think you realize how radically different cultures can deviate from our values.
Okay, I'm not ignorant on the world itself. I understand, but that does not make other practices right. Just because someone does something doesn't make it right. And even
From my moral view, yeah. From some sort of arbitrary objective standard, no, there is no objective standard.
I completely disagree. So, um,
Why don't we just have a dictatorship then? Why don't we just have a dictatorship? Since there's objective morality, why don't we just have a Christian theocratic dictatorship in the West then? If there is
because
objective morality.
because that would be a violation of the principles of Jesus, which is to love thy neighbor as thyself. It doesn't say oppress thy neighbor. Jesus talked about understanding that people have to be have to live moral and good lives in order to gain access to heaven, and they have to get forgiveness and remission for their sins. But he did not say that I should force that on other people. That people should be convicted internally of
He didn't say don't do it
internally to what
either.
they're doing is wrong.
He didn't say don't do it either, did he though?
No, he did not. He never forcibly grabbed.
Well, how is most of Christian history persecuting people and suppressing them under biblical law?
Because this is what happens when you mix religion and state, and you never want to do that. You don't want to mix religion with the state apparatus, like we saw historically in the past.
So what you're saying is the state's more important than Christianity.
Theocracy is not a stable form of governance, because what it does is it's very rigid, and it's inflexible. And
what are you talking about? Saudi Arabia is a theocracy. It seems to be doing pretty well just now. The United Arab Emirates is a theocracy. I think they're doing pretty well.
They're not theocracies. They're actually monarchies. They have elements of theocracy in them, but
they're under Sharia law. They're by all functions a theocracy.
They're definitely not a theocracy. They have elements of the religious law, but
by the way, this brings me on to another point I want to bring.
Well, let me
you talk about despotic dictatorships, but for some reason Saudi Arabia gets a free pass with you.
I don't. Okay, so this was an issue of morality. We're going to foreign policy now, but if you want to talk about that, I will.
That's not foreign policy. That's morality.
Okay, well, no, it's not.
You believe
subjective morality versus subjective morality.
You believe despotic dictatorships are a bad thing, and you're against them. Saudi Arabia, by definition, is exactly that. But for some reason, you don't support it. For some reason, you give them a free pass.
Saudi Arabia is not like Iran, and it's not like North.
Would I be imprisoned for being gay in Saudi Arabia? Which I am.
Well, I didn't know you were gay, but
I could tell you I would either be imprisoned and or executed. So I don't think they're doing that better than Iran.
Okay, well, I have spoken to people who live in Saudi Arabia, and they tell me a different story of what goes on there. Now,
now you sound like an apologist for North Korea.
No, I'm not.
At least, do you know what North Korea? As much as North Korea is a horrible place, do you know what they don't do? They don't execute gay people.
You assume that because they allegedly don't do that, okay?
And no, there's nothing in North Korean law that prohibits homosexuality. Have gay people probably been executed for other reasons? Sure, but when it comes to being progressive on LGBT stuff, North Korea is better than Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
Okay, so no, because in North Korea, you suggest that it's a terrible totalitarian state, but at least they don't oppress gay people. That's actually not really true. There are problems with the LGBT.
I'm not saying they don't oppress. I'm saying there's no laws in North Korea that are overtly anti-gay compared to Saudi Arabia, where I would probably be thrown off a building.
maybe not like in North Korea, but they still have. Again, you suggest that in
No, what I'm saying is you have a double standard.
don't have a double standard. Being LGBT in North Korea may not be de jure illegal in North Korea, but
why won't you just admit that you support Saudi Arabia because it's economically and strategically advantageous, and that's it? Why are you trying to paint one of the most brutal regimes on planet Earth as a nice place?
so we're really diverting from the topic here,
No,
which was
no, 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 no.
active versus to
No,
form,
no. Is Saudi
and it's
Arabia one of the most brutal regimes on Earth? Yes or no?
no, it is not. And Saudi Arabia is actually reforming. Okay, is it this open paradise? No, it's not. But there's a difference between
So you,
that
so
are
so
actually
you, so so,
reforming
so you
versus
think
enemies that are not reforming. So let me finish. Okay, so in Russia, okay, they're actually making laws now that are actually going to legalize some forms of domestic violence. They're going in the reverse, while in places like Saudi Arabia are
I wouldn't go to prison in Russia
laws
at least for
now
being gay?
that are now more egalitarian. So
Okay.
now, for example, they're
Okay. Okay.
women
So
drive.
what you're
Now
arguing?
they're allowing women to get out of the home and travel without male
So,
guardianship.
so
It
what you're
existed for a very long time.
what you're
And
saying?
now they're
No, no, no,
actually
no.
now promoting even anti domestic violence laws.
What you're saying
They're
is
going in the right direction
what
compared
you're
to
saying is
enemies that are
no,
going
no,
in the
no, no.
wrong direction.
What you're saying is if we're nice to Saudi Arabia, they'll become a better country. Well, why isn't that applicable to Iran or North Korea? Why can't you extend that olive branch to them if that's your logic?
Because they are not interested
How
in
do you know?
because
Have you tried at least? Have you tried
uh,
to?
there have been plenty of administrations that have tried. Let's look at the Obama administration. They tried it with Iran, and Iran is literally still going backwards. So they tried with the Iran deal, sort of
They
strategy.
elected a moderate president and they introduced the Iran deal. That doesn't sound like such a bad thing. That
That
sounds like
no,
a
they
step in
didn't.
the right direction.
Iran did not elect a moderate president.
Yeah, yes, he was in a centrist. He was elected from a centrist party.
Okay, yeah, centrism in Iran today is a very different from centrism.
So isn't that better than the fundamentalist that that's been elected into power in response to your aggression against Iran?
And our aggression, also no, it's aggression. It's Iran's aggression.
What do
So
you mean it's Iran's
we're
aggression?
getting off the topic of morality here. I want to really get back to it.
Did you forget the last 4 years with Donald Trump and saber rattling that country?
And getting us out of a terrible deal, which we should have gotten, which we never should have gotten in the beginning.
What's terrible about it? What
Because it gave no it, because what it gave the impression that Iran had would be allowed to pursue nuclear energy, right, which is a great way to get energy for a country, but that it
Mhm.
would just not be allowed to make to go nuclear in order to pursue nuclear weapons, or give it the idea, or give it the ability to pursue nuclear weapons.
Okay.
Problem is that with that deal, there wasn't enough authority for Western powers to really investigate and ensure that the Iranian government was abiding by it. Because, for one, that deal did not include any random.
That's weird. From what I've
Um,
heard, most outside sources said they were holding to that deal to the T basically. And then Trump got rid of it. And by the way, he got rid of it and then tried to just introduce the Iran deal again, but to North Korea essentially.
well, that's not true. There are plenty of independent sources that state that the Iran,
What independent sources?
the UN agency, that is pretty much, very much independent.
Okay.
I don't understand, because I had this debate with one guy named Ace Arcus on Twitter, and I showed him the fact that people from the UN itself were saying that Iran is not completely abiding by the deal it made, And he then said, well, why should we believe, the deal? Why should we believe the UN? And so it's because it just comes down to this idea of, oh, well, I don't want to believe that they are because it gives me because not believing it means that I can pretend that everything is hunky dory. But the reality is that yes, they were. People just don't want to believe it.
Like going back to
Because even if the most
going back to Saudi Arabia, by the way, 184 executions were carried out in 2019. To put you in perspective, the US is a much larger nation, and it has like not like a tenth of that amount of executions. Do you think that's the criteria of a civilized and humane society? Do you think that's not a red flag at all?
I think that unlike Iran and unlike North Korea and unlike the Russian state or the Kremlin,
The Russian state uh, um, doesn't have religious mandated executions. At least I don't like Russia's government either. But to say that Russia is like a more morally reprehensible state compared to Saudi Arabia is like bonkers.
oh, sure, they just legitimize in Pakistan a very religious, crazy state.
Like you legitimize
Where there's one land rule.
like you legitimize Saudi Arabia.
So unlike Dagestan and unlike the Kremlin, Saudi Arabia is actually reforming and going in the right.
Oh, what? So when we legitimize theocratic monarchies, it's fine. When Russia does it, they're the bad guys.
When the ones that we support are actually making laws that protect the rights of women, and like for example, the driving law being rescinded, when they're actually now promoting
They still need
laws.
they still need a minder to approve to drive. Like they don't just get to drive still.
Not from what I've heard, no.
No. They need
And let's
to
look,
get consent from their minder. That
and we also have now in Saudi Arabia
do they have minders in
going to
Russia
university
for their
and
women?
getting educated,
Do
and
they have
now no longer even not even needing a male guardian to travel out of the country.
Does Russia need a male guardian at all?
Is Russia is Russia
Does Iran need a male guardian?
is Russia legalizing domestic violence so it can, because it's got so many people,
Does Russia
because it's got
execute
so many people
infidels?
because it's got so many people who are essentially beating their wives that they don't, and going to jail, that they need to try to protect so artificially their workforce. And so and so I like what Sheikh Rule says. Iran does have male guardianship.
Well, okay, fine.
We're coming on the 1 hour and 5 minute mark, and I want to close at 1:10 at the latest, like I usually do for my debates. So quick sticks. You have the next 3 minutes. Make your closing arguments.
Wait a minute. Hold on.
Yeah.
I don't think. By the way, I don't think that's true about Iran and Guardians. I think that's wrong. But anyway, yeah. What I've learned from tonight is you're in massive denial and you have very weird standards for countries. You'll spend all day. Spend all day LARPing for Saudi Arabia, one of the most brutal regimes on earth, but then you'll poo-poo Russia for doing exactly what you're doing. You seem to think you can't seem to separate morality from like a template that society functions on, which people don't even need to live in a society either. So even if you try to use that argument of the template, it's wrong. So um, what I've learned from tonight is you don't really have an argument at all, and you're just reading from some sort of weird neocon manifesto, and for some reason you think repeating the same thing doesn't makes it sound less ludicrous, but it just makes you sound more and more like a lunatic.
Well, I'm not a raving mad lunatic, and I think from speaking.
I mean, you are you defend Saudi Arabia, but for some reason, uh,
I don't defend bad actions against human beings that are evil. I know Saudi Arabia is reforming. I know that you do hold water though for North Korea and Iran, but not if that's your
no,
closing.
no, 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 no. I don't like North Korea or Iran. I'm saying you hold a double standard, even though they're essentially just as brutal and horrible as each other. And I don't know why you don't just admit you support Iran because it's strategically and economically advantageous.
I don't support Iran. I support the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia because they are reforming. They have a prince in charge who is taking the country forward, not backward, and
Okay, extend that to
it
Iran
is a
then.
strategic out, and it is a and is going forward. Now, I do appreciate your time, Quick Sticks. Thank you for coming on for this debate. It's obviously been heated at times, but very respectful, and so I do appreciate you coming on.
No problem.
All right, we'll have one of these again in the future, maybe. We'll talk about foreign policy again. Have a good night.
Good night.
All right, so there you have it, everyone. That was Quick Sticks, and we debated the topic of is morality objective or subjective? Obviously, we had a different perspective. We even went into a little bit into foreign policy, but I do want to appreciate everyone who came on and listened. And we'll be having definitely, hopefully, another debate again in the future. So, everyone, thank you for your time. Have a good day. And don't forget, death to all tyrants.